In this movie, I'm going to pass along 4 things that you should absolutely know about saving in Photoshop. The first one's just an FYI. The other 3 rank among the best safeguards available to you inside any application. So what we've got here inside the Layers panel are a bunch of items that are essentially retouching my face. So let's say I go ahead and click on a hair layer and shift-click on a darken layer, on an empty portion of it, by the way, and I press the backspace key here on a PC or the delete key on a Mac to get rid of them. Also, go ahead and turn off these smart filters by clicking on the eye in front of the words smart filters here inside the Layers panel. Now notice that we have a couple of asterisks up here in the title tab, one of which appears inside the parentheses next to that little tag RGB/8, and the other appears outside the parentheses. The first one is pretty technical. It tells you that the color profile that's being used by the active document does not match Photoshop's profiled workspace. And I'm not even going to begin to go into what that means this early on, but I will tell you that it's not a problem because Photoshop always uses the color profile that is saved along with the document. Your colors are going to look the way they're supposed to. This asterisk outside the parentheses, however, indicates that you have unsaved changes. So let's say I want to save those changes by going up to the File menu and choosing the Save command, or you can press the standard keyboard shortcut of Control-S here on a PC or Command-S on a Mac. Now let's say it suddenly occurs to you that you've made a dreadful mistake. You didn't want to turn off those smart filters, and you definitely didn't want to throw away those layers. And this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time, by the way, especially if you're a fan of keyboard shortcuts. And the reason is that right next door to the S key on an American keyboard are the A and D keys, which get used a lot. Notice under the Select menu that Control-A selects everything in the image and Control-D deselects everything. And so if you just slightly slip, you're going to hit Control-S instead, at which point the telltale sign is that you're no longer seeing an asterisk outside the parentheses. Well, it turns out you're actually safe. In order to restore the stuff you got rid of, go up to the Window menu and choose the History command, which will bring up the History panel. And by default, the History panel tracks the last 50 operations you've applied. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make my panel a little wider by dragging its left-hand edge so we can see the word Save right there. That tells us that that was the last point at which we saved the image. But we've also got this open state, which will take you back to the way the image looked when you opened it. And notice that turns on the smart filters, and it also brings back those hair and darken layers. If the open state is rolled off because it was more than 50 operations ago, then just go ahead and click on the file name up here at the top, which will take you back to the way the image looked when you first loaded it. And then presumably you would go up to the File menu and choose the Save command in order to update the file. Instead, however, I'm going to choose the Revert command in order to restore the saved version of the image without its layers or smart filters. Now, I mentioned this in a previous chapter, but it bears re-mentioning now. Notice that when I chose Revert, unlike in every other application, I do not see an alert message warning me that I'm going to lose my unsaved changes. That's not because Photoshop doesn't care. That's because it's not true. I am not losing my unsaved changes. In fact, notice that Revert is tracked here inside the History panel. All I have to do in order to get rid of the Revert is to press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And notice that that goes ahead and brings back my history states as well. So because Control-Z or Command-Z is a single level undo, if I were to press it again, it would redo the reversion as you're seeing there and get rid of those states. That means that I have an independent undo system inside the History panel that I can exploit as well. And it really is a lifesaver at times. All right, now that takes us to our final topic, which is auto-saving inside Photoshop. In order to adjust the auto-saving settings, you go up to the Edit menu here on the PC. That would be the Photoshop menu on the Mac. You drop down to the Preferences command, which is much higher in the menu on the Mac, and then you choose File Handling to bring up this panel right there. Notice this checkbox, Automatically Save Recovery Information. That is turned on by default, and I recommend that you leave it turned on by default. However, I like to save more often. And so instead of 10 minutes, I like to go with 5 minutes. And that way, if I crash, and of course, like any application, Photoshop does go down at times, you stand a really great chance of saving any modifications you made to an independent file. And what will happen is all of those auto-saved images will open automatically the next time you restart Photoshop. And to make the change occur, just go ahead and click on the OK button, like so. All right, now the last thing I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac in order to undo the revert, so it's still an undoable operation, because preference modifications don't count in history. Notice now that we have an asterisk outside of the parentheses, so it means I have unsaved changes. If I go ahead and click on the close box to the right of the file name here on the PC, it's on the left of the file name on the Mac. And then I'll see this alert message telling me that I have unsaved changes. If I click the Yes button or the Save button on the Mac, then I'll go ahead and save my most recent changes, which would, of course, restore the layers and the smart filters to this file. If I click the No button or the Don't Save button on the Mac, then I'm going to abandon my unsaved changes, which in the case of this file would be very unwise. But here's the thing. This is permanent. So if you click either of these first two buttons, there is no going back because history is not saved with your image file inside Photoshop. And that's because history only lasts as long as the image is open. So what I recommend you do as a wise Photoshop user is you click the Cancel button and you make an informed decision before you close the image. In my case, what I would do is go up to the File menu and choose the Save command. And that way, I now have an open state with the word Save after it. So I know exactly when I save that image. And by the way, I still have the option of clicking on this final state right here in order to go back to the bad, precarious state of the image. So in other words, I still have as much flexibility as humanly possible. And those are the 4 things you need to know about saving any kind of image, layered or otherwise, here inside Photoshop.